start recording. No, I was saying, yeah, no, everything. So everything that you read, all the New Testament was written between the time that Jesus, Jesus's ministry and the destruction of Jerusalem, AD 70. The only one that like I've ever looked at as being newer than that would be the Revelation, right? And some scholars would put that in like him being on the island of Patmos in the late 80s or early 90s.
I thought some of the gospel stuff or the New Testament stuff was like 100 and some years later.
No, maybe some critics will put it that way, but like none of the early church believed that. And so, and especially like when we were reading Hebrews, what I was noticing more and more is him talking like this old system, which is soon to pass away, and he's talking about it like it hasn't happened yet. And they're being persecuted, and things are really heating up. But he's like, but the destruction of this old system is about to happen. In other words, the writer of Hebrews is writing at a time where there's still the old covenant practices are still being, they're still having sacrifices. They still have the temple, all of that standing. But Jesus is like, not one of these stones is going to be laid on another. Because when we read Matthew 24, Mark 13, right, they're saying, what about this temple, the destruction of the temple, and the end of the age? And what they're saying is, the end of the age is the end of the old covenant. And he's saying the new covenant's going to be ushered in. Now, you could look at Jesus's death and his resurrection, but like in Hebrews, I was noticing more and more, yeah, this is also a process, and it's also about to happen, because when the temple was gone, it vindicated what the Christians were saying, that the old is passing away, and now the kingdom is and it's going to go everywhere. And it wasn't just the Jewish thing anymore; it was going to all nations, and it spread to all nations.
Sorry, Mike. Mm-hmm. So even though they were under Roman rule, the Romans hadn't torn down the temple, and then around 80 AD, or 87 AD or whatever it was, then they decided to tear it down.
No, it was 80 70 is when it got torn down. Yeah, it was under siege for 3.5 years by Titus Vespasian, I think, during that siege, and like on the city, people were like eating their children, and they were eating dung, and it was and they were saying things like rocks fall on us and kill us, because the day of the Lord has come, and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. Josephus is going. I'm going to dig up some Josephus, because he was there, and even though, like I said, even though he was a Pharisee and everything, he was saying, man, you wouldn't believe what went on in Jerusalem, and it was nasty, really, really gross. And somebody described, like, I think it was, I can't think of who the historian was. He said that Jerusalem looked like a forest of crosses. They were just like, it was just like, yeah, they were like,
the Christians fled.
The Christians fled.
So who were the Christians?
Oh, Jews.
Okay.
Yeah. The destruction on Jerusalem, Jesus was warning them about it, and he was presenting it as the wrath of God on them, for and was like, because he's like, woe to you, O Jerusalem, like how often I would have gathered you like a hen gathers her chicks, but you, so now your city's laid to you, your house is left to you desolate. He's forecasting, like that, he's like, and and what he does is that he is in Jerusalem. And if you go like look at Matthew 20, 21, 22, everything building up to the Olivet Discourse, he's warning them, and he's laying into the Pharisees, and and it's like, you killed the prophets, and the blood of all the prophets is on your heads, and he's using really, really harsh language. And then what he does is that he goes and he goes to the Mount of Olives, right, from the temple. And this is what happened in Ezekiel's vision, is that you had the presence of God leaving the temple and resting on the Mount of Olives before it leaves. And so it's almost kind of like he's reenacting that, and he's saying across from it and the Mount of Olives, and his disciples are like, look how beautiful that building is. He goes, yeah, not one stone's going to be left on another, and they're like, tell us about this, and tell us about the end of the age. So when you read Matthew 24 in that light, you're like, yeah, that was like he was forecasting their destruction.
Like
Not-
not the end of,
Yeah.
not the end of the world, as we say it.
Yeah, right,
Like,
exactly,
Jesus is
yeah.
already describing the end of the age of the old covenant.
Right. So what I've always said is that I see it as like already, but not yet. Right.
It's like the same thing is applicable to two
M-
different periods.
yeah, maybe. Okay. There's definitely things that I've seen that I'm going, well, there's still the return of Christ, right? And there's still the bodily resurrection. And then us ruling on the earth. Now, I still believe that the millennium is in the future,
Yeah.
but even at the end of the millennium, there's a rebellion. So you're talking about a process, there. So, but we can't get into all of that. But one of the things that you're going to see here in Daniel 7 is sort of that. Now, I'm not going to. Next week, I think I'll concentrate a little bit more on how Jesus used it, how Jesus used the Son of Man language for himself. So we'll go more into the New Testament next week. But this week, let me see what we got here. Let's share this, and I've got like a very cool video at the end too. That kind of ties together some of the things we've been talking about, like over the last year. So this is we'd already kind of looked at the beasts and everything, but we're going to get into the passage of the Son of Man sitting at the right hand. Well, we know that the Son of Man is sitting at the right hand of the Father. We're going to see the Ancient of Days, who is God the Father, and how there's a Son of Man character who's Christ, who goes and sits up, who's riding on the clouds and who's given authority. So of course we're right across, in the chiasm, in the Aramaic chiasm, that structure. We're here, and with the four beasts, which echo really the four kingdoms that were described in Daniel 2. Now, of course, you have the head of gold, which is Babylon, and then Persia comes after that, and Greece, and then you get legs of iron, Rome, and then you have the destroying rock of the kingdom of Christ, and it's all happens solidly, like right in that Roman era, right? The only way that you can really think, well, this is something in the future, is if you're like, well, it must really skip ahead then. So even in this graphic right here, it says, feet in iron and clay, the divided nations, 8476 to present. I just have this here for the illustration. It's not like I'm trying to say, this is the divided nation. Well, yeah.
All this prophecy is jammed up right around this.
It
right before Jesus.
Right before Jesus, yeah.
But we're always in our modern times applying all this stuff
to future.
Yeah,
and it's kind of like, if you want to get, if it is future, then you have to look at what happened in the first century to get a clue of what will happen in the future. That's what because if it brings you up into like what happened in Rome, you got to go, well, what happened in Rome that was so groundbreaking, and how are you going to recognize it when it comes, if it's in the future, right? Because there are things that are going to happen in the future, but sometimes when you look at prophecy, you're like, that's not all about the future, and you can, because Jesus didn't treat it that way.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, so that's why I'm like, already, but not yet. I'm more hesitant actually about the not yet than I am about the already,
Yeah, wow.
in a lot of cases.
Well, it's always easier to be more hesitant about what hasn't happened.
Yeah, there are some things here that, like, even in this one, I'm kind of like, oh, okay, well, I don't 100% get it, you know. And then, of course, we have the four beasts here, which were described. This being Babylon, this is Medo-Persian, and then Grecian Empire, and then we have this undescribed,
T-Rex.
you know, T-Rex monster. I don't know if it looks like a T-Rex or anything. So it brings us up to verse 7, the Roman era. So we kind of covered the other beasts last week. It says in verse 7, after this I saw in night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Okay, 10 horns. I can't tell you what those 10 horns are exactly. Read a lot of things about 10 horns. A lot of disagreement about this. Anyway, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them a little horn, a little one before which the three of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were the eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Yeah.
Does that mean that, like, so there was 10, 3 got uprooted, 1 came up, so then that makes it like there was 8 left then? Or is it saying like?
Yeah, 10 minus 3 is
Plus
7
1.
plus 1 is like 8. So there would be 8 remaining.
Because
Yeah.
it makes it sound like those 3 were removed and 1 came up in their
Yeah,
place.
I have a lot of questions about this part.
I know.
The other thing that I have a question about is, like, what does it mean, the eyes of like a man, right? So it's like you have these beasts described, and they're kingdoms of men, right? What is the but and then we saw the heart of a man was given to Nebuchadnezzar, because he, so it almost seems as if this has the appearance of somebody who is ruling with God. That's one way to interpret this. Okay, is like it, the eyes like the eyes of a man. So it's still the beast, but it has the appearance of something like what a human should be. So to kind of recap a little bit, like what we were saying, is that, like, when men don't rule under God or with God, they become like beasts. And when you become like, because you've lost the image of God, you're not really. It's funny. I Pastor Ken last night, he says, you know, that we lost the image, and I'm kind of like, yes and no, but I agree with that, because you know, if you're the image of God, it means you represent God, you rule with God, and you're His representative. That was the arrangement with Adam. So when you when what's it mean when you don't do anything, and, you know, like, on behalf of God or like God at all, and you just rule by yourself? Well, here in Daniel, you know, you have all these images in the Bible of beasts, and that, like, you know, like, yeah, it goes, you're just given into the lust of the flesh, and you're kind of reduced to like the animals that you're supposed to rule over in the first place, but worse. So what's it mean, like the eyes of a man? And I've thought about this. So I'm just speculating a little bit, but I'm thinking it looks as if there's something that appears to be like religious or holy or something about this horn, even though we know that this is a not a good thing, right? The eyes were like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. I kind of think that, like, the way that Jesus used it was to call the Sanhedrin the beast of this. So, okay, so this is and I'm not alone in this. Okay, when Jesus says to the Sanhedrin, they're saying, they're asking him, "Are you the Son of God?" And he says, "Well, you said I am, but I tell you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man, you know, coming on the clouds, you know, and being, you know, seated at the right hand of the Father and everything." And he tears his robe, Caiaphas does, which is, by the way, is illegal, right? He breaks the law basically to do that. He's an illegitimate priest to begin with, and and what he's saying, it's kind of like this. If this is Tim Mackey was saying this, I like how he put this. If I come up to you and I say, "Luke, I am your father," who am I calling myself? Darth Vader. Who am I calling you? Luke Skywalker, right? In this story, if Jesus is saying, I am the Son of Man, right? Who's he calling the Sanhedrin? Who's about to kill him? He's calling them the beast of Daniel 7. This is all about Daniel 7. So it's kind of like, so that, like that he's insulting them at the same time, making a claim of who he is. So he's, yeah, right, yeah. So it's and the more you see that, you're like, he because he's already been telling them, your kingdom's going to be taken away from you and it's going to be given to another. So like so you're thinking, and not only that, but it's going to be given to people who are international. They're Gentiles. Because he starts putting that in the parables, and they know that all these most of these parables are pointed at them. They don't like him because of what he's saying about them. They're trying to accuse him of blasphemy because he is against the authorities. And what Jesus has been telling people is that I've come here for the lost sheep of Israel. The lost sheep means these people have no shepherd. All these people who are supposedly their shepherd, like the Sanhedrin and the priests, they're fakes. They have no shepherd. I came here because they're lost. And when John the Baptist is baptizing people, and he's saying, repent because the kingdom of God is at hand. It's here. It's coming quickly. And then the scribes and Pharisees show up. John the Baptist says, like, you brood of vipers, who warned you about the wrath that to come? He's talking about AD 70, right? And how are you going to escape that kind of a wrath? He's like, so their ministries.
He was talking like, well, why would he be talking about the end of the world if they would be dead long gone by then?
Yeah, right. Yeah, he's warning of them.
More like on spiritual level, like
yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, once you start seeing that and you start like flipping through Matthew, you're going, wow, they're building up to AD 70. There's no doubt that is a big part of the equation. Perhaps it's the main part of the equation.
Where's the prophets today?
Yeah, the prophets, right? Like, well, what he's talking about, you mean the prophets who he's
No, I'm just saying, like, at that time, obviously Jesus was. You have no problem telling anybody anything. That's like, no, I'm a little careful. No, I'm just saying, like today, because I mean, we see, there's a lot of fake phony religions.
Yeah.
That are, and I mean, it's a different, it's a time.
Yeah.
The dispensation of grace, you could say, but still, I mean, a prophet is really, a voice of mercy. It's harsh, and it seems, but it really is a voice of mercy.
Well, it's a voice usually of warning.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a warning so that you can repent.
Yeah.
Rather than, I just wonder, where are the voices?
Yeah.
Today.
I worry about like the church. I'll have more comments about that later. So I considered the horns, verse 8, and behold, there was a little one comes up. So 3 get removed. He gets in their place. Behold, this eyes like a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Verses 9 and 10. I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. This is God the Father, right? His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. His wheels were burning fire. This is the Ancient of Days who is going to execute judgment on the beast. Right? A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000,000 served him, and 10,000's time 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. So this is a divine council scene, the divine courtroom, where they're gonna be making some important decisions.
Isn't that Revelation?
Yeah, I was about to go to Revelation.
I was just gonna say about the term Ancient of Days. Is he described like that in other places too?
Well, later on in this, I don't know if it's outside of Daniel 7. No, but when you get to Revelation, this is a vision of Jesus, right? And it says, and in the midst of the lampstands, one like a son of man. So here's the Daniel figure, right? The Daniel figure, like a son of man, same wording that we're going to see here in a second, actually. Clothed with a long robe and a golden sash around his chest, which is priestly garb. So because he is the high priest. But here, the hairs of his head were white, like white wool, just like his clothing white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. It's the same kind of description, right? But this one is the Son of Man. So his eyes like a flame of fire, his feet were like burnished bronze, refined in a furnace, and his voice was like the roar of many waters. So what happens in Revelation and elsewhere is that Jesus starts being equated with the Ancient of Days. So the picture that you have in Daniel 7 is that you have the Ancient of Days, like pronouncing judgment, and then you see the Son of Man, right? But in Revelation, what you have is you have language like the Alpha, Omega, beginning and the end, things that are applicable to the Ancient of Days, but you see that the Son of Man himself is also the Ancient of Days.
Is it saying about the Son of Man in this part of Daniel too, though, or just the Ancient of
Days? It doesn't say this in Daniel. What you see this in Revelation is that you see visions of the Son of Man, but now he's looking like the Ancient of Days himself. And what Jesus is going to do, what Jesus did in his ministry, is that he used Son of Man language, but he also was talking about executing judgments like the Ancient of Days in Daniel 7. So they become sort of one and the same, right? There's going to be some like one and the same sort of language that you're going to see back and forth between Daniel 7 and Revelation. Revelation takes these images and then when you you'll see the fusing of the two images. The Ancient of Days and the Son of Man now are fused into one image almost, right? Or to identify the Son of Man also as being one with the Ancient of Days. Let's put it that way, right? You're also going to see the Son of Man as being the one and the same thing as the followers of Christ in Daniel 7. You're going to see that in a second here.
It's weird. We have such in our head that Jesus has a shoulder length brunette.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And that God the Father has gray hair.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so in other parts of Revelation, you see him as John hears a lion, and he turns around and sees a lamb. It's the same thing. We know that, but the lamb that was slain from the foundations of the earth here is portrayed as the Son of Man character of Daniel 7, who is also the Ancient of Days from Daniel 7. So that's interesting. So I looked then, because the sound of the great words the horn was speaking, and as I looked, the beast was killed, and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with the fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. So you're going, well, what happened to Rome? Rome didn't really just go away. There's something happened here, okay? If that, which brings a lot of people to go, well, it's all of a sudden jumped to the future, and I'm like, okay, hold on, maybe there's an indication of something in the future, and I think there is, but there's something. There's a dominion here. Now, when Jesus says all authority and power has been given to me on heaven and earth, he's making a pretty definitive statement that like all kingdoms are mine now. Okay. So this happened in the first century, at least in one way. And we kind of dismiss it as like, well, yeah, it's kind of, well, again, like already, not yet. Okay. But it definitely happened. And all authority was given to Christ, and he is sitting at the right hand. Jesus reigns currently, and we are in his kingdom. And it's like, because all authority is given to him, go therefore. It's like, I'm sending you out as well, So I'm asking a question here. Is there a sense in which spiritual dominion on earth was taken away in the first century while earthly kingdoms continued to reign? And I think, yeah, there was, to whom? Well, it was given to Christ and his followers, but from whom is the question. And I think that it has a lot to do with the Jerusalem system,
Like from the priests, that now
Yeah, because Jesus said so much about that. So I saw in night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a son of man, and he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. So the vision that you see in Revelation is that, like these have become that they're one and the same, but at the same time they're not, which is very, like with the Trinity and everything. I mean, I think we should be used to this kind of an idea. And to him, okay, now all of this language is going to be to him, right? A single person. To him was given a dominion and glory and a kingdom that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. So here's the interpretation of it. As for me, Daniel, my spirit within me was anxious, and the visions of my head alarmed me. I approached one of those who stood there. So he's in that heavenly courtroom. So he goes up to an angel or somebody there, right? And I asked him the truth concerning all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of the things. These four great beasts are four kings that shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom, and the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever and ever. So here it's kind of like you see the Son of Man as he, and the interpretation is the saints of the Most High. Who has he seen? He has seen so far one like the Son of Man, and he, him, and him. And when he gets the interpretation, the angel says, "But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess it, and forever." So it's almost like the same sort of like a union, like where you have the Son of Man. It looks like the Ancient of Days in Revelation, and then here it's kind of like the Son of Man is the saints of the Most High.
Well, it's kind of like,
well,
you have the house, you're the man, the head of the house. It's Mark's house.
Yeah, right. Christ.
I was going to say this is more like the marriage.
That's right. Exactly what. Yeah, that's exactly. We're going all the way back to Eden. So we're going. Like male and free. Like he created man in his own image, male and female. He created them. So you go a him, a them, and then you have like and the two shall become one, and to be one flesh, right? And then Paul comes around later and says, therefore a man shall leave his mother and father and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one. But I'm speaking of Christ in the church.
Yeah.
Right? He's saying
because we're the bride.
Because we're the bride, and the two shall become one flesh. So it's all of that language is always like kind of like where we become, Jesus, when he's praying over his disciples, that I and them and me and you and me and all that, it's like that. It's all that unity language, right? So actually, when you get to Revelation 2, it says, "The one who conquers and keeps my works until the end, to him I will give authority over the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron, as when earthen pots are broken in pieces, even as I myself have received authority from the Father." Jesus, in this vision in Revelation 2, is citing Psalm 2. It says, "I will proclaim the Lord's decree. He said to me, you are my son. Today I've become your father." This is a messianic psalm, right? "Ask me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, the end of the earth for your possession. You will break them with a rod of iron, and you will dash them to pieces like pottery." And whenever David has these messianic prophecies, it's hard to tell sometimes whether David is talking about himself or a direct son of his, or if he's looking just forward to the Messiah. We know that he's talking about the Messiah, but again, it's kind of like there's that fusing of them here. Jesus says this right out. He's like, the way that I've been given authority and I'm sitting at the right hand of the Father, you are going to to the overcomer, it's going to be the same thing. So that's why you have like the saints of the Most High, and the unity with the Him who is the Son of Man. The Son of Man really is like that terminology is like, it's like saying the human. The story of Christ is that he became the new Adam, the human that was consistently the image of God. And what it meant for the rest of humanity is that anybody who wants to join him or be like him or whatever, it meant the re-entrance into God's presence and God ruling with man the way that it was always supposed to be with Adam and Eve. That the way that it's always been supposed to be with all humanity. But of course, we were separated from that ruling space in Eden, but now can enter back in and rule because Christ is on the throne. It means humanity is back ruling with God.
When it says Son of Man, you don't see it as so much like a proper noun, but like more like
a title.
Like this is where the representation of humanity almost. Or
yeah, it's the
like the perfect
yeah. Well, son of it. Of course, we're thinking of like the offspring of the woman, or the seed of the woman. But we're also thinking, so there's multiple layers. The other thing is that when you say the son of the prophets, it means like one of the prophets. It doesn't mean like or the Bar Elohim, the sons of God, was the gods in the ancient mind, like in Genesis 6.
So more just like belonging.
Belonging to the company of whatever, there's something about that there. So it's the ultimate human, really. Jesus is the ultimate human. He's fully human and more fully human than any of us are in that way. Because he never lost the image of God, which is what humans were supposed to be in the first place. Yeah. So Daniel 19-22. Then I did decide to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from all the rest, exceedingly terrifying, with its teeth of iron and claws of bronze, which devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left on its feet. And about the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn that came up, and before which 3 of them fell. The horn that had eyes and a mouth that spoke great things, and that seemed greater than its companions. As I looked, this horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High. And the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. So this, again, I think has a lot to do with the Sanhedrin, and that's the primary focus here. I have questions about it, like what about the horns? I don't understand that, but I wouldn't understand that in a historical sense either.
Where it says the judgment was given to the saints of the Most High.
Well, it was like Jesus said, this kingdom is going to be taken away from you and given to another people. And I think that's what.
Like the judgment is given is like
the judgment is given.
People against each other, and this person won. The judgment was given.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, because they were being persecuted. Like the Christians. Paul himself was like, like really hateful to the early Christians, and there was like, he was one of these people in that whole Sanhedrin system.
Yeah, but that can easily be viewed too, like at the end of the day, he's like,
yeah, right.
After he said told the martyrs just wait a little longer.
Mm-hmm.
So after they
right.
get their whatever their
right.
recompense for their.
Well, a good preterist would say, well, that was all Jerusalem.
And then
back in the day.
Then they could also say the saints possess the kingdom. That could also seem like it refers to the millennium, right? Like when.
Yeah.
That's.
Now I'm actually I'm a millennialist. You know, no, I am a millennialist. But like as in it's in the future, you know.
Yeah.
But
One thing I thought about when you reading that where the saints, they'll say, you know, wait a little while.
wait a little while.
Is that, you know, so they're had been martyred. So they're
Oh, yeah.
eternity in paradise and wherever, you know.
Yeah, they're in heaven, which is the courtroom of heaven.
But there's still a sense for them, maybe not of
The resurrection hasn't happened yet.
right.
So they don't have. It's like I think it's misleading to say when you go to heaven you get a new body. There's no description of that until you have the physical resurrection on earth.
But that's outside of time. So I mean, I don't.
Well, I don't know. I don't think it's outside of time. You know, like
Eternity, like the time is different. The time is past. You know what I mean?
yeah. Well, okay. Here's a couple things like that I've noticed in Revelation 6. First of all, heaven is completely concerned with earth. You don't go to heaven and forget all about earth. When you get to the language like and the former things that passed away and all that, that's New Jerusalem stuff. That's further down the line. That's a time, and that has more to do with the new heavens and new earth than the trouble that's going on in Revelation 6. Revelation 6, it's like they're coming up there and they're lamenting in a way, how long is it going to be? And they're told, wait a little while longer till the full number of your brethren has come in. Then you see God taking judgment. So it's not God breathing his judgment on like, you know, like we're not destined for judgment, God's judgment, right? But that's not the same thing as like, say, the Antichrist tribulation. That's not God's wrath. You know, God's wrath comes as a result of the Antichrist tribulation on the saints. But you know, but again, you know, like we think of like heaven as resident destiny when it's really described more as the royal headquarters where the universe is run from, the courtroom, right? So because we're like, well, you go to heaven and you're in heaven forever. Well, you're from the community in heaven forever, but what about the new earth? And why was earth made in the first place?
Yeah, because heaven comes down to earth, right?
Well, the New Jerusalem coming down to earth, yeah. So you have the community of heaven, you know, like and during the new heavens, new earth. That's the story of the Bible is about the renewing of all things, including earth, and the lion laying down with the lamb, and peace on earth, and all those kinds of things, you know. So that is when you lose sight of that, you lose the story, because you and for the most part we have, because we talk about like the Bible starts off. If you look up heaven and hell in the Bible, try to find how often those two words are together. What the Bible talks about is heaven and earth, and it's about the union of heaven and earth with man reigning on God's behalf, because the earth was made you know, for God's pleasure, but like man was supposed to rule with him over the earth. And it's not about like, well, we're going to scrap that idea. You escape to heaven, and everybody else goes to hell, and then forget about any kind of earth. That's not the picture at all in the Bible. And when even Job knows this, he goes, you know, I know my Redeemer lives, and I'm going to see him on my day, and in my flesh I will see God when he stands upon the earth. That's what his hope is. That's what the entire hope of the Old Testament is. It's like this earth is corrupted because of us. We're supposed to rule over it. And all of creation is waiting as in birth pains for the Son of God, for the sons of God to be revealed, so things can be put right again, and that the right and that the right leadership will take place. Man sitting on his rightful throne, Christ the figure, but ruling with God, God's way. We made the mistake of thinking that we could rule the earth our way. That's the disaster that happened.
Even the Lord's Prayer.
Even though, yeah, on earth as it is in heaven, and so it is about the new earth. And I emphasize new earth so much because the story becomes much clearer once you refactor all of that in.
It's weird too, the term New Earth. Now, I mean, it sounds like New Jerusalem comes down to the earth, the current one as I see it, but
Right.
in English, when we use the term new, it doesn't say like in the Bible, the restored earth or the renewed earth. It almost like, I used to have the idea that this earth would almost become hell, and I thought God's almost gonna make a new earth, like.
Yeah,
another
it
planet
does.
almost,
It
but-
now it does look like it involves the destruction or decreation of this this earth. Like the elements burn in fire. That's that sort of thing. So
It's
there,
also after a
but
forest
we
fire.
see that. Yeah, but we see that always like with that decreation language. Stars falling from the sky and everything that you saw in Genesis and creation being reversed or whatever. But even the destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonians was described as, and it became empty and void, tohu wa bohu, and the animals have all fled, and the skies have there's no more light coming from the stars and sun. It's like all these things in Genesis are now gone. It's become like a desolate wasteland. It's like decreation language. But anyway, so as I looked, the horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High, and the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. Thus he said, as for the fourth beast, there shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all the kingdoms, and it shall devour the whole earth and trample it down and break it to pieces. Yeah, so like,
But Rome,
yeah.
Rome was really only a tiny part of it. Well,
But look at the Catholic though, I mean, you go all throughout the world, they
Yeah.
have an influence
Yeah.
for such a tiny little nation.
As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the former ones, and shall put down 3 kings. He
man,
shall.
that's so specific. Putting down 13.
Yeah, right.
That's really specific. Like when in history.
Yeah, I don't know.
They got,
He shall speak, as some people will describe this as all being Antiochus Epiphanes, and I'm going like, it doesn't make sense. That would have happened like during the leopard beast thing, the Greek era. But he shall speak words against the Most High. He shall wear out the saints of the Most High. He shall think to change the times and the law, and they shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time, which would be half of a 7, all right? But the court shall sit in judgment, and his dominion shall be taken away to be consumed and destroyed to the end. And the kingdom and the dominion of the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. His kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. So there's that conflation again between, are we talking plurals or singulars here? The people and his kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom. So, I love the way like the Hebrew text plays with these things all the time.
I always am like, are they doing this on purpose?
Oh yeah, it's deliberate.
It's like
It's
so
fully
like-
deliberate. Yeah. It's like you see the angel of the Lord and it says, and the Lord says, and then the angel of the Lord did this, and and then God said, and it's like, wait a minute. So is it the angel of the, that's why you're going, well, it's separate from Yahweh, but it's also Yahweh. This is like the hints that like where we get Trinitarianism. We have there's a series that Michael Heiser does on the Jewish Trinity. and like the concepts that they had, which it wasn't like the New Testament believers all of a sudden made up the idea of the Trinity. It was in the water. People were talking about these things. It's just that when Christianity really started taking off, Judaism turned against that idea, and they started spreading propaganda to kind of contradict something that they were already saying in the first century.
They
So
wanted to be like distance themselves.
yeah, Here's the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly alarmed me, and my color changed, but I kept the matter at heart. So, past, future, Jesus used Son of Man language from Daniel 7 to point to the coming judgment of the Sanhedrin, the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, the handing over of the kingdom of God from the religious rulers to another people, and the establishment of a new covenant. That's already. The question is there an application of that, Daniel 7, to future events, the not yet part of it? And if there is, will it have to do with the religious authorities again? If we're going to look at the first century and what happened in AD 70, are we looking at like a restored Sanhedrin or something? Probably not, I don't think so. So is it going to, but perhaps is it the so-called church? I say so-called church, I saw this from Jameson Fawcett Brown. He wrote this like 500 years ago. But this is somebody who's definitely look at Daniel 7 like as a future thing, right? He says, it is striking. The fourth monarchy, in other words, the fourth beast that's mentioned here, though Christianized, because Rome became Christianized, right? Though Christianized for 1,500 years past, so 1,500, this guy lived a long time ago, is not distinguished from the previous heathen monarchies, or from its own heathen portion. Nay, it is represented as the most God-opposed of all, and culminating at last in the blasphemous Antichrist. The reason is Christ's kingdom now is not of this world. And only at the second advent of Christ does it become an external power of the world. Hence, Daniel, whose province it was to prophesy of the world powers, does not treat of Christianity until it becomes a world power, namely at the second advent, Christ's second coming, right? The kingdom of God is a hidden one till Jesus comes again. We see that in Romans 8, Colossians 3, etc. Rome was worldly while heathen and remains worldly, though Christianized. So the New Testament views the present aeon or age of the world as essentially heathenish, which we cannot love without forsaking Christ. Don't love this world, because if you love this world, you're not worthy of me. That's this loving this world is forsaking Christ.
Did he put all those references in there?
Yeah, he put all those references in
That's
there.
cool to see. Like, I think of it as such a modern way of writing, but
Yeah.
they were doing this a long time ago already. That's
Yeah.
commentaries and comparisons.
Yeah. I love reading some of these old commentaries. The object of Christianity is not so much to Christianize the present world as to save the souls out of it. That's a great one-liner, right?
I feel like
That
that
transcends time.
I feel like that's not really- like politics and stuff sometimes it's like
Yeah, right.
I've started saying I care more about morals than politics because like
Yeah, you're to be in the world but not of it,
I mean, I'm gonna vote for like a pro-life bill for sure, but
yeah,
like, sometimes I feel like I can't really change the
you
world.
are still the salt of the earth, and
I
like
would
where
really
does
expect to be able to-
where does it like end? It's like, where does it take over? Like, does it go into politics, and does it go into? But what we see here in Daniel was that God raised him up to the very top of politics. So it's not. But Daniel, I think, still saw himself as not part of that. But that God was, God's always on the throne, right? So you gotta be careful with, I think, like dominionist kind of like theologies, and we're going to the picture in the Bible is definitely not like Some people think, Christians will eventually take over, and
I feel
then,
like I never see that.
and then, yeah, I mean, I don't know. So the object of Christianity is not so much to Christianize the present world as to save souls out of it, so as not to be condemned with the world, but to rule with him in his millennium. This is our hope, not to reign in the present world course. There must be a regeneration of the world as of the individual, a death previous to a resurrection, a destruction of the world kingdoms before they rise anew as the kingdom of Christ. Even the millennium will not perfectly eradicate the world's corruption. Another apostasy and judgment will follow. This is something I've always noticed. At the end of the millennium, even, there's Satan's released for a while to deceive the nations once again, and they make war on the people of God.
The end of the millennium?
At the end of the millennium, yep. Yeah. So we've got a lot. If you believe that the millennium's still in the future, there's still a long road ahead for everything to happen.
And we could be in it now.
That's the other.
Well, that's the other
You know what,
point of
whatever.
view, is that this is the
I still gotta
millennium.
do the same
you
stuff
know.
every day.
So even the millennium will not perfectly eradicate the world's corruption. Another apostasy and judgment will follow, in which the world of nature is to be destroyed and renewed as the world of history was before the millennium. Then comes the perfect earth and heaven. Thus there is an onward progress, and the Christian is awaiting for the consummation, as the Lord also is expecting. In Hebrews, he's sitting at the right hand of the Father, waiting for the nations to be put under his feet.
Can you go back to the slide with his name so I can look it up again?
Jamieson Fawcett Brown. Just go to Blue Lettered Bible Commentaries. Usually, like if you Google like say Daniel 7:13 commentary, the first thing that'll pop up is commentaries by the Blue Letter Bible, and you'll have like a lot of the classic commentators who are not under copyright. Anything from Darby on before, people like Matthew Henry, or these are all old commentators. I've and a lot of them are, I would say old commentators that are from the Protestant tradition. So you'll see a lot of commentary that's very critical to the Catholic Church, of course, in there. But what's also interesting is that I found in none of those commentaries do they ever describe anything like a pre-tribulational rapture. None of them. Not until Darby. So that's 300 years ago or whatever. And then popularized with but like here, what I've noticed also, some of the other things that he has is that he's talking about the new earth, right? He's not talking about like just heaven and going to heaven or whatever. That's not something that like these commentators are ever saying either in these older commentaries. They're always talking about the new heavens and the restored earth and those sorts of things. So actually I wanted to close. Let's go ahead and let's do a new share. This I thought was really, where is it? Safari. Okay, let's share this and check out this video.
Oh, video.
If you read the New Testament, you'll notice that the most common title people use to describe Jesus is the Christ, that is, the Messiah.
But surprisingly, Jesus almost never used that word to describe himself. Instead, he called himself the Son of Man.
The Son of Man. What does that mean?
Well, the phrase comes from an important chapter in the book of Daniel in the Old Testament. Daniel was an Israelite prisoner of war who was forced to live in the empire of Babylon and work for the prideful, violent king who destroyed his home.
That sounds horrible.
And while he was living and working in Babylon, Daniel had this crazy prophetic dream. You ready for it?
I'm ready.
He saw 4 beasts crawling out of the dark sea, hybrid monster-like animals, each scarier than the one before. And the 4th beast is so mutant, there's nothing to compare it to. And it's violent, leaving death and destruction in its wake.
What in the world is this about?
Well, he's told that these beasts symbolize violent tribal names and their empires.
Oh, like the one Daniel's enslaved to.
Yeah, and these creatures might seem random to you, but these images are developing an important biblical theme. How humans are these remarkable creatures, capable of doing great good and horrible evil.
How we can behave like animals.
Right. Look at the first pages of the Bible. God created the beasts of the field and humans together, all from the dust. But then the humans are set apart and given a royal task of being God's image.
So humans are like the animals, but called to become much more.
Yeah, they're to be God's representatives on earth, ruling on his behalf, like kings and queens. But keep reading, and the humans are deceived by a beast who says that they could be more than just God's partners.
Yeah, that they could rule the world on their own terms, which sounds good for them.
But God knows this will be a disaster. And so he expels the humans to the realm of the beasts.
The partnership is lost.
But God makes a promise that one day a human will be born who won't give in to the beast. Rather, he'll overcome and strike the beast while being struck by it.
Okay, so for the rest of the biblical story, we're waiting for that human. But instead, in story after story, we find people acting like beasts.
Yeah, like in the next story about Cain, who's jealous and angry at his brother Abel. God warns Cain that he's facing a beastly urge called sin, a dark, mysterious kind of evil that consumes humans. But God says that Cain can rule the beast if he chooses.
But he doesn't rule the beast, he lets the urge devour him. He becomes a beast.
And then after this, Cain's children spread their animal-like violence, and it leads to the founding of a whole civilization known for its beastly pride, the city of Babylon.
Okay, Babylon. So fast forward, this is where Daniel is enslaved, having this bizarre dream.
Exactly. Now, watch what happens next in Daniel's dream. He sees into God's throne room where a court is set up, and God condemns the beast to destruction.
That's great.
And then Daniel sees that there's actually more than one divine throne.
Oh, right, the throne that humanity left behind.
Right. There hasn't been a human who's able to overcome the beast and rule alongside God until now. Daniel sees a figure called the Son of Man, which means the human. And he rides on a cloud up into God's presence and then sits down on the divine throne to rule the world.
The partnership's renewed.
Yes, and even more, all humanity worships and serves this Son of Man alongside God.
Worship. So this is no ordinary human. This is like a god human.
Exactly. And so now you can see why Jesus of Nazareth, when he came onto the scene centuries later, chose this title, the Son of Man, for himself. He was claiming to be that truly human one on a mission to confront the beast.
He was tempted to seize power on the beast's terms.
But unlike every human before him, Jesus resisted the urge. And then he went about managing the beast for people's lives. And he was teaching people how to rule the beast instead of being ruled by it.
Okay, so how do you rule the beast?
Well, Jesus did it by giving up his life.
Wait, rule the beast by dying?
Yes, when Jesus was on trial in a human court and being condemned to death, he said, "From this moment on, you will see the Son of Man sitting at God's right hand and coming on the clouds."
But this is the moment he's about to die.
Exactly. From one perspective, the cross looks like a beastly torture device, but Jesus viewed it as his throne. And on this throne, he exposed the subhuman nature of our evil by letting it do its worst, and then he overcame it with his divine life and love. Jesus' execution was his exaltation.
So Jesus is the first human to overcome the beast. And as a result, he can partner with God to rule the world.
And so now, Jesus is summoning a new humanity into existence, one that can overcome the beast in the same paradoxical way.
To rule the beast by dying.
And then by discovering that Jesus' life and power can become our life and power. So we can rule the world as God's partners, but Jesus style, in the power of service, humility, and self-giving love.
That was cool.
Yeah.
How they illustrated that a lot.
Yeah, it's a cool illustration. It was absolutely packed.
Yeah.
You know. But like when Jesus says, like anybody wants to be my disciple, pick up your cross and follow me. He's saying, follow me into this death, because so it's becoming like Christ, and taking on even the cross that
The day of the Lord.
oh, wait a
It's phrased in the
second.
Bible.
Sorry, hold on.
Like it mentions in Hebrews, bearing his reproach outside the gate.
Might be familiar with this image.
Sorry.
of Jesus.
Sorry about that. I thought I heard Aaron there.
Yeah. I was just saying, like it says in Hebrews about bearing his reproach outside
Yeah.
the gate.
Outside the gate, yeah.
What does that mean,
Yeah.
bearing his reproach?
Bearing his reproach. It's the same kind of reproach that Christ had, like where he is where he
Like
was,
carrying like.
yeah, you're carrying the same, and like he was crucified outside of the city gates. It's kind of like it harkens back to, remember, like there were two animals that were brought. One was the scapegoat, went out into the wilderness. That was outside the city gate, is when where you would have that, and you'd have the scapegoat, but the blood of the slaughtered animal would be brought into the Holy of Holies, and Jesus actually fulfills both. So he's bearing Christ's reproach, living sacrifice, all that language. Yeah, that's a lot there. But
Like,
yeah, go back to that Hebrews, that chapter in Hebrews when we covered it. I don't even remember what the notes I took down on that was, but
When
Where
I
is-
first came in, I was sorry.
No, I was just gonna ask Aaron, where is it found? Hebrews what?
Oh, I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to
Okay.
look at the reference, but I
No
know
worries.
it's in Hebrews.
yeah.
Um,
But that's there's always like that big story, and like when you connect all the dots, it's amazing how it all starts falling together, coming together.
That's weird, I keep saying lately, the Bible keeps getting smaller, which sounds weird or counterintuitive, but.
Yeah, right.
It's all like such about just.
The same thing, yeah.
Yeah, it's different ways of doing it.
Yeah. I'm kind of jealous of people who know Hebrew, just because there's those repetitions of words, which will take the same word and we'll translate it into different English words. But if you're looking at it in Hebrew, you're like, this is like a double entendre here. It's repeating that word again, and it's repeating that theme again, so here, can I show you guys a couple things? I don't know. Well, we've been here for quite a while, so
I would go for it. Anyone could leave.
yeah. Well,
You guys are dismissed.
so yeah, you guys are dismissed. For anybody else who's curious, I will
Already,
also say
but Afterglow.
the afterglow, right? So this will give you a little bit of a clue, just so that you can kind of get used to this. Here, if you look, and this is about the destruction that was going to come on Jerusalem because of their disobedience, and it's the destruction that's going to be brought out by God through Babylon, right? It says, I looked on the earth, and behold, it was without form and void, and heavens, and they had no light. I looked on the mountains, and behold, they were quaking, and the hills moved to and fro. I looked, and behold, there was no man, and all the birds of the air had fled. I looked, behold, the fruitful land was a desert, and its cities were laid in ruins before the Lord, before his fierce anger. For thus says the Lord. Now think of this. Everything here sounds like Genesis 1 language, right? It's basically describing the destruction of Jerusalem as decreation. So I'm not just throwing that word out like decreation language. I would say hyperbolic, symbolic decreation language that is repeated throughout the Bible, because you see it often. So there's two directions that you can go with, and I've brought up symbology a lot, right? One is to say, like a lot of the liberal scholarship has done, is to take symbolism in the Bible and make it mean whatever you want to, right? Or to make it subjective. Well, I see this. Actually, some Pentecostal circles will do stuff like that too. It's you're not really free to do that. You interpret the Bible based on the Bible. And the other thing that you're not really to do either is to try to take symbolic language in the Bible and make it literal, because you end up with like all kinds of weird stuff. Now, one of the things that I was noticing when I was doing Revelation was I read nothing but like conservative scholars that were like, they were actually all pre-tribulation, stuff like that. I've never even read, and I decided after a while, the pre-tribulation thing isn't correct. But I was like, but one of them was written by a Christian geologist. I think his name is Henry Morris, and he would describe all these things in Revelation as like, well, the earth, and he's going into all this scientific stuff, right? And then at the same time, he would cite all the verses that sounded like it from the Old Testament. So I'd look up the Old Testament stuff and I go, well, if you apply all the geological stuff back to the Old Testament stuff, it's not talking about that at all. So why are we jumping to all of a sudden like turn this into like literal stuff when the Bible's giving you the language already? Why aren't you just looking at it like that? So here's another one, like Isaiah 13. This is a prophecy against Babylon, right? And there's actually many of them. Listen, a noise in the mountains, a great multitude, and you see cruel day, fierce. The stars of the heaven and their constellations will not show their light. The rising sun will be darkened. The moon will not give its light. I will punish the world for its evil, the wicked for their sins. Put in, and it goes on like that, and it's all about prophecy against Babylon. Here in Ezekiel 32.
What's the point about it being a prophecy against Babylon though? Like, what are you saying about it?
Yeah, it's the language that he's using it is what I like to call, fancy word, cosmic decreation language. Like stars falling out of the sky is like that's like one of the first things put up, right? Let there be light in the sky. This is like something that happens all the time. Ezekiel 32, when it talks about what do you call it? Egypt, it says here, where is it again? Oh yeah. Thus says the Lord your God. You consider, okay, raise a lamentation over Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and say, you consider yourself a lion of the nations, but you are like a dragon of the seas. In other scriptures, it calls him Rahab, which is a seven-headed sea monster. There's a lot of connections between here and Revelation 12, in any case. You burst forth in your rivers, trouble the waters with your feet, and foul their rivers. Thus says the Lord God, I will throw my net over you with a host of many peoples, and they will haul you up in my dragnet. I will cast you on the ground. On the open field I will fling you. I will cause the birds of the heavens to settle on you, and I will gorge the beasts of the whole earth with you. And this is like language you hear in Revelation, right? I will strew your flesh upon the mountains. I fill the valleys with your carcass. I will drench the land, even to the mountains, with your flowing blood. The ravines will be full of you. When I blot you out, I will cover the heavens. I will make their stars dark. I will make their stars dark. I will cover the sun with a cloud. The moon shall not give its light. All the bright lights of heaven, and all that kind of stuff.
I've been talking about us writing our own praise and worship songs.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he's a, yeah.
I don't know if it's gonna be a Christian metal band or what.
So when you see the things like Acts chapter 2, and and it's like they start speaking in tongues, and who was it? James comes up there and goes, "Listen, this is like what Joel was saying in his prophecy. The young will have vision, the old men will have dreams, and even on your maidservants, and like they're going to prophesy and all that." And then he goes into darkness and thunder and stars falling from the sky, all this kind of stuff happening before the day of the Lord, and you're wondering, why is he talking about that all of a sudden? Because he knows it's going to happen in 80, 70, basically. But
Is that in Ezekiel?
this is Ezekiel. This is Ezekiel.
I haven't read that book in like so many years, but it's pretty.
Yeah. So I think that
Yeah, I'm hearing the song already. It's really bad.
oh, I'm probably not even. Oh, yeah, I am sharing this. Well, anyway, it's just kind of like. So when you get to Revelation, you're like, okay, we've heard this language before, and I think that brings you a lot further into interpreting what it's all about, instead of guessing this thing and that thing. I think you really have a problem if you're talking about stars falling out of the sky, especially if they're going to land on Earth. Like if you're thinking of trying to sciencefy it or whatever. I don't know.
See,
Yeah.
but this, oh, never mind. That's some factors, so.
Yeah. So no, it's the language is there in the Old Testament, and you get to see it. So I'm like when you're guessing at the stuff, it's kind of like it's not good. Go to the Old Testament. Look up. There's a good commentary will have all the reference, even if they don't even if they're like that guy I was reading, like Morris, who's trying to interpret it all like in geological terms. At least he did his study well enough to cite all of these Old Testament passages where it borrowed it from. So ironically, I learned a lot from his book. Even though I disagreed with the conclusions he was coming to. At least he studied them, and that was a very valuable book to me. So, so I think I'm just preparing you for like what you're going to see in Matthew 24, because I'll mention that I think next week maybe. But go back and read Matthew 24 and just read it carefully and see what you think, and if it changes anything. So anyway, I'm going to stop recording and